Hey guys, it's Fantasy King here. Didn't we love seeing footy being back, being played on our TVs? Quite a few good things and quite a few bad things to take from round 1 in AFL Fantasy. Mainly the good. I scored 2141 and I was ranked in the top 9,000. Let's get started into my team and I'll give you the +3 and -3. So there are quite a few contenders for +3 and -3 on my team. Taylor Adams had an outstanding round 1 with 151, but he's not the +3. Roy Laird, 142, he was amazing, but he's not the +3. The +3 belongs to Dyson Heppel, 156 against the Hawks. He played his career best game. I think he had 36 possessions and he kicked 3 goals. He is amazing. I got judged for picking him on my team. People said he wasn't ready. He was ready. Onto the -3. A few contenders for this one as well. Tim Taranto didn't get much for the ball against Adelaide. He's not my -3. Mitchell Hibberd against West Coast was also very disappointing. He's not my -3. My -3 belongs to Brett Eddy against Sydney. And he is up against a tough opponent, don't get me wrong. I'm not expecting an awful lot of him. But Port did win on the weekend. They started off really well, but he just couldn't mark the ball inside the 50. He couldn't even get a touch. So he's never going to be fielded in my team again. He's going to be in my bench though for next week. I don't think it's quite worth getting rid of him yet. Let's just see how he goes next week. Onto my trades. Now, I didn't trade Brett Eddy, I didn't trade Andy Otten, I didn't trade Mitchell Hibberd. All the teams haven't been announced yet other than the first game, so these trades could change. At this stage, I have Patrick Cripps out, and this one's incredibly harsh because, you know, he did score a disappointing 77, but he is a primo, but I just felt I had one too many primos in my team and one too many rookies. So I got rid of Patrick Cripps and I put in Andrew McGrath, and I consider him as a mid-pricer. He was absolutely amazing against Hawthorn, and I don't think he'll do any different against the Lions. My other trade was Joel Smith. He's going to be missing 4 months, so it's not worth keeping him on your team. I put in Zach Tui as my D4, and I reckon he could average as high as 90 this year. He looks very good. Corey Enright and Jimmy Bartell both retired last year, and that's probably going to boost Zach Tui's average by at least 5 points. So it might be a bit of a risk getting him, but it could pay off very well. Here's my fantasy team preview for round 2. Taylor Adams, Roy Laird and Sam Doherty. All expecting them to ton up because they're all premium. Not much can be said there. Zach Tui up against North. Since Enright and Bartell retired, I reckon he could score up to 90 this season. Andrew McGrath, I think he'll do just as good against Brisbane as he did against Hawthorn, and he should deserve a Rising Star nomination for the next round. Caleb Marchbank, also another young gun, and despite playing against a harder opponent than Richmond, I still think he'll score well. On my bench and defences, Curtly Hampton, who will average around about 60s for the rest of the year, and Andy Otten. I don't think he'll score a lot. I think he'll score around 45. Onto the midfield, I have Adam Chalor as captain again this week. Very solid 125. I reckon he could go as high as 150 this week, although that's kind of unlikely. I think he'll get around 130 this week against Richmond. Tom Mitchell up against a tough opponent, which is hard to score against against Adelaide, but I still think he'll ton up. Nathan Fyfe up against Port. He's a very consistent player. He's one of the best players in competition. I expect him to be around 100-105. Dyson Heppel, my vice captain this week. He's up against Brisbane. Essendon's midfield will be all over Brisbane in round 2, and I think he'll be one of the main contributors to that. Dane Beams, I reckon he'll score about 90-95. I think his score will be a bit impacted on Essendon's great midfield. Jago O'Meara, he will improve on last week, even though Adelaide is a hard team to score against. I reckon 80-85. A lot of people drop Swallow because You know, he's very injury prone, but I reckon he'll be back to his best. I reckon he could score 80 to 85 against GWS. Sam Powell-Pepper up against Fremantle, won a Rising Star nomination last week. In round one, he was amazing. I reckon he could back that up with a 65. On my bench, I have Jake Barrett, who's up against Essendon. I reckon he will score 50. And as for Mitchell Hibberd, wouldn't be surprised if he gets dropped, but I reckon he will score around 45. Onto my Bucks now. Max Gawn is up against a tough cruiser, who's in very good form. However, I think Gawn will still turn up with an 105. Then Curvis is also up against another tough rock. Collingwood, I reckon he'll score 80. Braden Preuss is on my bench, will score about 55. And Darcy Cameron, if he returns, I reckon he could score up to 60. In the forward line, I have Luke Dowhouse. He's up against Sydney. I don't think he'll score massive, but I still reckon he'll turn up. Took Miller up against GWS. I don't think he will turn up because GWS have a very good midfield, but I reckon he can still get about 85 to 90. Jared Ruffhead up against Adelaide. I reckon he'll kick a few goals and get himself to 85-90. Will Hoskin-Elliott was so good last week. He's up against Richmond this week. I reckon he could get to around about 70. Tim Taranto was disappointing last week, but I reckon he'll improve this week and score about 65. And Dan Butler against Collingwood. I think he won't do as good as last week, which is against Carlton. Carlton have a pretty bad defence, but he should kick a few goals and get himself to 55. On my bench, I have Jared Pickett, who was pretty bad last week. He is up against Melbourne, which is even tougher of an opponent, but I still think he will improve, about 45 for me. And Brett Eddy up against Fremantle, who Fremantle are pretty easy to score against in fantasy. I reckon he will score a 40. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you leave a like if you did, subscribe to stay tuned, and I'll see you later when round 2 is completed.